Some kid drowned in the river. Now they're digging up a swimming hole. Yesterday I played center field. I needed some half innings alone. Doubled off the Buddhist minister. Knock the tie and run home. Mini Doka, bottom nine. Two-0 count, a good lead-off third. Toss me something fast and low. I dreamt I saw a model plane this morning, flying past the boundary road. Caught the eye of Abel Grable, sliding into second to beat the throw. Flurry started and I thought of the man who got lost from block 3 in the snow. Blanketed in white, freezing in the night, cursing and scared, feeling foolish, dying alone. The first baseman got married. They rode an army truck out to Twin Falls. Spoke their vows in a hotel suite as a broken pump organ wheezed through the walls. Little sister butchering the wedding march. Some sweet comedy to it all. Mini Doka, dressed in white. Mini Doka. Snowdrifts bounce in the moonlight as the evening took the afternoon. Deep in the count, staying alive, 1,000 spectators, nothing better to do. Under diamond cut stars, horizon to horizon, and a translucent milk glass moon. Mini Doka in the night. Under diamond cut stars, horizon to horizon, and a translucent milk glass moon. Mini Doka, dressed in white. Mini Doka.
Gila River,
Poston,
Jerome,
Rower,
Amatchi,
Manzanar, Topaz,
Tule Lake,
Heart Mountain,
Minidoka,
Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We're so happy to have you with us today, and thank you for joining us for this important conversation about bearing witness and AANHPI advocacy for immigrant and refugee communities. I'm Keiko McCracken, she, her pronouns, and I am the External Learning and Development Specialist here at North Sound, and I offer a warm welcome to all of you, and I'll be providing a framing for our time together. A shout out to Portland Tycho and the recording artist Julian Saporiti, who performs as No Boy, for their generosity in allowing us to include the song Minidoka in our presentation today. Our gathering here today is about remembering, about connecting, and building together. We'll have a chance to reflect on the unjust targeting and incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II and the powerful ways that history informs solidarity across immigrant, refugee, and marginalized communities today. We hope to inspire everyone to consider their own rich history, their family's history, their ancestry, and the challenges your family may have faced with the support of others around you. The individuals, the organizations, and the community that made your story possible. When we show up for each other, we create a future together, and that is why we are all gathered here today. And to begin our time together and to ground us in the land that we are on, we honor those who came before us and who are present today through North Sound ACH's land acknowledgement. I ask you to take a moment to reflect on the ancestral lands that you and your family may inhabit today and to honor those individuals and tribes and nations that are present always with us. And for us at North Sound ACH, this is our land acknowledgement. We begin by acknowledging with humility that the land where we are today is the territory of the people of the Salish Sea. Their presence is imbued in the waterways, shorelines, valleys, and mountains of the traditional homelands of the Coast Salish people since time immemorial. And just a little tech tips and housekeeping. We invite you to review the tech tips on this slide, to locate the Q&A function, or to raise your hand to enable interpretation if you are in need of that. And we have also enabled closed captioning for ease of access already. We will have time for a live Q&A at the end, but also feel free to add questions to the Q&A box as they arise for you, and we'll be collecting those and returning to those. You'll also see a chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we encourage you to use that for your reflections and your responses throughout the session. We really want to hear your voice. This event is being recorded and will be available in the future in our resource library. And finally, we have a short survey for you at the end. We so value your feedback, and we're going to place that survey in the chat right now, so you'll be able to open up that tab at any time for ease of access, and we'll do so again at the end of the session, so you don't lose sight of that. But feel free to open up that tab now and just keep it handy for you for the end. And now I also want to offer you what we use here at North Sound as our group agreements. They are based on our values and principles that we practice daily with each other and with community. They begin with a remembrance of a commitment to curiosity, courage, connection, care, and compassion, what we call our 5 C's. We invite you to be reflective and to reflect on each one of us has our own positionality and biases. We invite each other to embrace complexity and make room for multiple truths, to practice vulnerability, empathy, and emotional intelligence, and listen to listen and not respond, and always using first person language. And finally, what is said here stays here, and what is learned here leaves. And another way I heard just last night in a webinar I was on, the way that they described it was the learning leaves, but the story stays. So we don't know what each other carries. Take care of yourselves during this time. Take care of your families, your teams, and we invite you to center bridging in this space that we hold together, and to ask questions out of curiosity, and also critically to recognize that we will not be able to resolve everything in real time that may come up, but we will keep track of things and return for follow-up for anything that we're not able to get to today. This is a complex topic, and there are aspects that we won't be able to attend to today, but we acknowledge that more is in this conversation. More conversations are needed than what we'll be able to provide today. And so, another way of centering ourselves is within the vital conditions. And as we move through this learning session, we lean on that understanding of the vital conditions for health and well-being that is one of North Sound ACH's primary guiding frameworks. And in particular, today, the most important vital condition of all, which is belonging and civic muscle, and the ways that that is expressed through freedom from stigma, discrimination, and oppression, support for civil rights and human rights, civic agency, and collective efficacy. We offer these learning sessions to our community as part of North Sound ACH's Collaborative Action Network. And we invite you, if you're not already part of the network, to reach out to us because it is such a rich learning community that one can be part of. And so, in our time today, which we've already just kind of gone through some grounding, we're going to have a panel introduction to our wonderful panelists. We'll have time for questions and reflections from all of you. And then we will be able to close this learning session out together and reflect on where this path takes us next. And so, our learning goals today are to build knowledge of AANHPI history and anti-Asian exclusion, to increase awareness of AANHPI communities within the North Sound region, and to promote cross-cultural support for current immigrant and refugee communities. And again, we won't be able to address all aspects of these complex issues. Things are moving very fast, as many of you know, and there are just challenges that we face that we won't be able to resolve fully today, but by the end, we'll have moved closer to a more inclusive and generative community with a rich appreciation for the ways that history can be a guide. And as the Japanese American community says, never again is now. But before we hear from our panelists, which I'm so excited for you all to be able to experience their wisdom, I just want to kind of warm us up with kind of a collective energy warm up here. And so I invite you to consider, what does solidarity mean to you? In one word, what does solidarity mean to you? And to type that in the chat. But don't press enter yet. We'll just take a moment to kind of think about, in one word, the first thing that comes to mind to you, and then I'll count us down. So just give you a second, and then 3, 2, 1, go. And I love reading some of these: unity, showing up for one another, support, a couple of shout outs for unity, compassion. Unified comes up again and again, showing up for one another, respect, kinship. So important. Thank you, Adriana. And just kindness. These are such important qualities for each of us to embody at this time, sharing. Thank you so much, each of you, for just kind of, giving voice to the essential qualities of what we want to sponsor here today. And so with that in mind, I am going to move us to our wonderful, wonderful panel, and just give a warm welcome also to our moderator for today, Rajdeep Atwal, who is the Director of Care Coordination. And as we move toward that panel, just remembering that history is not just something we study, but something we carry. And today we'll have a chance to draw the line from 1942, when more than 120,000 Japanese Americans were incarcerated without trial, to today, when immigrant and refugee communities continue to face exclusionary policies, surveillance, and violence. Our panelists today are people who live and breathe solidarity work across communities. And so let's get ready to listen, to learn, and imagine new ways of showing up for one another. And to lead us in our discussion, I have the great pleasure of introducing Rajdeep Atwal, Director of Care Coordination.
Thank you so much, Keiko, for that warm welcome and that warm introduction. Moving into our panelists, I'd like to warmly also introduce them. We have Van, Brian, and Stan all joining us today to talk more deeply about AAPI and the lessons that we're going to be taking away from today's session. So I also would like to warmly welcome them and then also give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. And so if they're able to be spotlighted, that would be wonderful. And then I would like to remind everyone that this is also going to be an opportunity for you all to join in on the conversation. So please feel free to enter your comments and any questions that you have for our panelists in the chat. So we have someone watching our chat channel today, and we'll be able to get some of those questions answered by our panelists. And so while our panelists are being introduced, think about what's standing out to you. What parallels are you seeing in your own community experience, and drop those into the chat box here. And so to introduce our panelists, we have Van, Stan, and Brian. And I'd like to give each of you the opportunity to introduce yourselves, but then also, can each of you share your connection to this topic, either through your personal story, your organization's work, or historical legacy? What moments in your life or life first awakened your sense of justice around this topic and made you want to get involved with advocacy? How about Van? Can we hear from you first?
So good morning, everyone. My name is Van Kuno. I am an Executive Director for Refugee and Immigrant Services Northwest. I am a former refugee. And on April 29th, that marked my 50 year in USA. And I came here at younger, and now I already received a magazine for AARP. So that's telling you, when you're over 50 years old, you got that kind of magazine sent it to you and ask you to become a member. So at the refugees on April 29, 1975, my family had less than 20 minutes to pack our bags and leave the country, and we didn't know where we were going. And the only thing we know is we probably never return. So we arrived to Saigon Harbors around 2:30 in the afternoon, and my father had a connection with United States, and we be able to get through the narrow gate at Saigon Harbor. And about 6 o'clock, the boat left the harbor for good. Like I said, we had no captain, just somebody had some knowledge about direct the boats. And the boats is supposedly be able to carry roughly about 150 people, but we have over 1,000 people in the boats. So we just had a tiny spot in there and curling up. And we thought we'd be able to go to Taiwan after 3 days in the Pacific Ocean, but we did not get welcome to Taiwan. And we've been pushed out, and we didn't know where to go from there. And the boat is run the circles, and we got into the storm. And we keep bobbing on the big ocean at that time. And the day number 8, we run out food, fuel, and water. And the storm pounding on us, but also that say our life, because we be able to get the water and survive. And the day number 10, we got rescued by the U.S. Navy and pulled us to Subic Bay, Philippines. And from there, my journey began to Guam, to Arkansas, to Minnesota, and I'm here today in Washington. My training is a biochemist, but later on, I changed my career to social services. when I aware I been single out, been different and been isolated when I was at University of Minnesota. As the science student, beside the lectures, you had the time to do the lab. And I never get picked up by my classmates. I don't know the reason why, because I'm different. I speak English with accent, or people think I'm not brave enough to be partner with them. And that's the time it a wake-up call. I realize I'm different. I realize I had to defend myself. I realize I had to advocate for myself if I want to survive, if I want to be successful. So that experience it stayed with me until now. And later on, I changed my career to working with refugee and immigrant. And I be able to transfer survival skill I have to helping refugee and immigrant in the last 25 years. So I will stop here and I will go further in the next question and the question I have from you. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Van, and thank you so much for the wisdom that you're going to bestow on us today throughout our journey together. So, Brian, I would love to hear from you, and if you can share, just as Van did, your connection to this topic, and if you have, a story to tell us as well, we would love to hear it.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, I just want to start by saying I'm the content director at Densho, and Densho is a Seattle-based organization that focuses on archiving the history of the Japanese American wartime incarceration and also speaking out about the relevance of that history today, hoping to prevent things like that from happening in the present time. Densho is about 30 years old, founded in Seattle in 1996, entirely online. It's an entirely online operation, though, so it's available to people all over the world at any time. So it consists of archives of oral histories, photographs, and documents, an online encyclopedia, and a lot of other resources. So just a quick introduction to Densho and its resources. As for myself, I'm a historian of the Japanese American experience, Japanese American history, which I've been doing for almost 40 years now, which is scary to even say out loud. I trace my interest in this on almost a subconscious level to my mother. I remember when I was 8 years old or thereabouts, I played an April Fool's joke on my mom, who had this great sense of humor, and expected her to laugh, and but she didn't. She was very serious, and she pulled me aside and she said, in this house, there's no April Fools, because that was the day my father died and my brother died. And she told the story of what happened. He was a Japanese American immigrant community leader in Hawaii who was arrested on the night of December 7th after the attack on Pearl Harbor. He was a editor of one of the two main Japanese American newspapers in Honolulu. And it's a long story, but it ends up with the family actually going to Japan on an exchange ship during the war. And along the way, her father and her youngest brother both died in the Sea of Japan on April 1st, 1945. And that just stuck with me. For many Japanese Americans of my generation, part of our history is that our parents didn't talk about the story of their wartime incarceration. It was too painful to talk about. And, my mom was not one of those. So that was always part of what I knew about my family history. And then years later, like Van, I was a science major in college. I have a degree in engineering, and the world is better off that I did not become an engineer because I was just not very good at it. But there was one Asian American Studies class offered at my college at the time, which I took, and I'm forever indebted to that class for, nudging me in this other direction. And my career kind of went off in that direction since then. always kind of inspired by the story of my grandfather and my mom's family in the back of my head all these years.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate hearing the resilience in your voice and also some of that history of April Fools isn't necessarily April Fools in your household and how different that may look in everyone's household. So thank you again. And lastly, but not least at all, Stan, can you please introduce yourself, your organization, and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Rajdeep. And thank you, Van and Brian, for sharing your stories. So my name is Stan Shikuma. I'm a Sansei, or third generation Japanese American living in Seattle. I am on the Leadership Council of Tsuru for Solidarity. You can see my t-shirt. And I'm also on a board member and past president of the Seattle chapter of the Japanese American Citizens League. So the JACL is the oldest and largest civil rights organization in the Japanese American, actually, I think Asian and Pacific American communities in the United States, formed in 1929. The Seattle chapter itself was formed in 1921. Tsuru for Solidarity is much younger. It started in officially in 2019, but really got its start in 2018 during the first Trump administration. And Tsuru in particular is focused on supporting immigrants and immigrant rights. The reason I got interested in it, I guess, would go back to when I was growing up. I grew up on a farm, a berry farm in California. So we grew raspberries and strawberries and blackberries. And I was sort of, in high school, I was like the foreman or the crew chief of the raspberry crew. And one summer when I was probably 15 or 16, the Border Patrol decided that they would enforce immigration laws more stringently. So they started doing raids on farms in the whole valley where I live. And so I was out there with my crew, about 20 to 30 people usually. And suddenly all these, they didn't have Humvees back then, but that's what they looked like, kind of big Jeeps or trucks with the canvas sides. And they came roaring down the levee road, raising a lot of dust and screeching to a halt. And then all these guys in uniforms jump out and they start running towards the raspberry field. And I see about 1/3 of my crew just drop everything and start running. Basically it looked like they were fleeing for their lives. And probably half of them got caught and got put in the trucks and taken away. There was one older woman who was also kind of heavy set, so she wasn't running. So she just kind of sat down, and then when all the Border Patrol guys left, she looked at me and she only spoke Spanish, and my Spanish is very, very poor, but she managed to communicate that the people they had taken away was her ride home. So she didn't have a way to get home. So I asked if I could give her a ride in the truck back to the office where there's a phone. She could call someone and get a ride. So I said, sure. So I get in, we're going down the levee, and then the Border Patrol vehicle comes back and stops us, waves me down. And I guess he just wanted to ask directions or something. But anyway, the woman next to me, Juana, was like totally scared. Like I could see she was sweating and very fearful. And so I just smiled at the officer and talked and said, oh yeah, I'm just heading back to the farm. You guys took all my crew, so I don't have much to do now. So then they said, okay. And then they went back to their vehicle and took off. And so Juana was just profusely thanking me for saving her. And I hadn't done anything. Mm-hmm. All I did was just answer the questions that the guy asked me and try not to antagonize him. So I've always felt like, but I mean, she was like thanking me like I had just saved her life. So I always felt like I need to do something to deserve that gratitude. Because at the time I really felt it was undeserved, and that kind of touched me. The other reason I guess I'm involved a lot is because my family were taken away during the war. All my relatives, grandparents, aunts, uncles, mom, dad. Um, and my uncles told me that my older brother, who was 4 when they got picked up, uh, was put in camp, and they thought he would die that first year in camp because the sanitation was really bad, the poor food was really poor, medical care was almost non-existent, and he got dysentery and started losing weight, and so they thought, oh, this kid isn't going to make it. Fortunately, he did pull through and survived. But then when I go to the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma and work with a lot of Asistencia, people call out, they say, conditions are so bad because the food is inedible, the sanitation is terrible, especially during COVID, and the medical care is almost non-existent. And I'm thinking, we're 80 years past, and we're still doing the same thing to people, and conditions haven't changed. So, yeah, those are a couple of reasons that kind of spur me on.
Thank you. Thank you. It's hearing these stories and hearing what encouraged you or nudged you in the direction of advocacy. It's just one of those times that you just want to sit with it and just absorb. It's difficult to move on and go to the next thing, and our lives don't really allow us to just kind of sit in space sometimes. And I appreciate hearing each of your journeys. And I know we're going to dive deeper today, but even just the start of what got you here, and then hearing about um, how you all kind of set on a path and then made adjustments accordingly. Brian going from being an engineer and switching that, and, Stan recognizing that earning that gratitude, and Van, just, all of the wonderful work that you've been doing with refugees thus far. And so I am very humbled to be in this space with you all. And I'm very much so excited to hear how we can dig deeper into this topic together. And again, I'm going to encourage our folks that are listening that this is also an opportunity for you to join in the chat. So please, like, while we're talking and while we're diving into these topics together, what's standing out to you? What parallels are you seeing? Any questions that you have, please drop them into the chat and in comments. This is meant to be a fairly interactive experience. So thank you all. And I will go ahead and move us into our first question today for our panelists. And so we're going to kick us off with, what lessons from the Japanese American incarceration experience are most urgent for immigrant and refugee communities to understand now? And I'll let whomever that question rings to go ahead and jump on first.
Well, okay, I'll say something.
Okay.
I think the Japanese American experience was that the government has extreme amounts of power to do things, and they also have the power to ignore our basic constitutional rights. That's the lesson we learned, is that no law and no constitution can protect you if people are not willing to stand up for it. And during the war, a lot of people would let things slide because arguments of national security, military necessity, fear, a lot of fear of espionage, of spying, and also a fair amount of racism that existed in the country, combined in a package that got directed at Japanese Americans. And that allowed a lot of bad things to happen. So incarceration of an entire people based only on ethnicity, no charges, no trials, no hearings, no convictions for anything either. And then afterwards saying, oh, well, it was a mistake. And so I think a couple lessons is one is that it can happen. Like the current administration is talking about rounding up 1 million people. They want to increase the ICE detention facilities from capacity of 35,000 to 100,000. And some people are saying, oh, that's impossible. It's too difficult. It costs too much. It would take too long. Well, for Japanese Americans, Pearl Harbor happened on December 7th. The executive order authorizing the military to round everybody up was on February 19th. By July of 42, less than 6 months later, every single Japanese American on the West Coast was gone and put into a camp. So that's over 110, 120,000 people. So the idea that they can't do it because it's difficult or it's expensive, I think we need to be very careful about that, relying on that kind of thing to prevent it. I think the other lesson would be that when we got taken away, there were very, very few people who stood up and said, this is wrong. Virtually no government officer, governor, senator, judge would stand against it. And almost no organization took a position against it. Not the major churches, not even the ACLU at that time would take a stand against the incarceration. So I think we have a different situation now, and that's one of the reasons Tsuru and also JCL and a lot of other groups are standing up and saying, stop repeating history. Never again is now. This is illegal, unconstitutional, and we won't stand for it. And I think that's the hope, is that people will take a stand this time.
Well, I just want to add on what Stan just mentions. A lot of lessons we learned from the Thai Japanese American got rounded up and put in the detention camp or concentration camp, whatever way you want to call it. The Asian Pacific Islander, we always been labeled as a model minority or invisible minority. And we don't want to create problems. And particularly with the culture, we got, bottom-ups. We obey authorities and do whatever the people in power telling us to do. After we learn from the lesson Japanese Americans suffer through the treatment of the government back then, and also we learn the community people, hardly anyone stand up for the Japanese American when they got rounded up and put in the camp. And so that was, particularly on begin 2016, the refugee and immigrant community begin learn the lesson, organize and mobilize and voice the concern loudly. But in the this administrations, the way of stand up and stand by and stand together is getting stronger and stronger every day. And you already see hundreds of lawsuits throughout our country, and we just lock up the justice system and have this administration spend a lot of time to defend themselves and let Thai to round up our people. And so for the first 5 months of this administration, just a little bit over 100,000, refugee immigrants, and they got either detained or deported or suspension. So you probably just recently heard 2 days ago, this administration will suspend 350,000 Venezuelan arrive to our country legally under temporary protective status. They don't break the law. They come in because we allow them to come in. And now you said you suspend them. a lot of lawsuits are defiling either individual or in the group of people. So thank for the Japanese situations 80 some years ago. You opened the door, you clear the road for us at the refugee and immigrant walk behind you. Our gratitude to Japanese American. Without that lesson, and I think if we don't have that lesson to learn, I think right now we probably have millions of refugee in immigrant already deported out of the country. So we not silent anymore. We learned a wonderful lesson for our previous Asian group. And believe me, at the end, we will win.
Yeah, just to build on what Stan and Van have said, all of which I completely agree with. And as a historian, I'm probably going to give a completely unhelpful answer, but while there are these great parallels as to what happened, to Japanese Americans in 1942 and today, there are also some important differences that I think also inform how things that we can do now that couldn't have been done then, and vice versa. One of the big differences, as both of them alluded to, is just how today we're very much a split country, and there's a significant portion of the population, significant a number of political leaders, like almost half, who oppose what's going on today. And in 1942, it's hard to imagine any degree of unanimity that there was at that time. Literally, you could not name an elected official. I mean, you can on the fingers of one hand who opposed the mass exclusion policy at that time. Public opinion polls showed that almost all, the vast majority of people supported the mass removal of Japanese Americans. So that just opens up the possibility of political action today that just was not possible back then. A second thing is that the majority of those affected by the policy in 1942 were American citizens, and of course, American citizens are also affected today, but the percentages are very different, and I think that's a different thing today. Although the cynic in me, says, American citizens aren't as affected yet, which is something that we need to work to prevent. And then the third thing, and this might be a little controversial, but in part because there was such a universal support for this policy in 1942, it turns out that a lot of the people who were actually enforcing the policies at that time were in some ways somewhat sympathetic to Japanese Americans. And I'm not defending the War Relocation Authority at all, but it's a very different situation today where I don't think you see that. And in some ways, what's happening today is worse than what went on back in 1942 in terms of who was running these programs in ways that, are worse today. And in terms of, I don't want to frame it in terms of lessons, but maybe what I wish Japanese Americans in 1942 could have known what was going to happen in the years to come. One thing would be that one of the legacies for Japanese Americans today is that there's just this divide in the community that persists even today in terms of how we different ways of reacting to and responding to the incarceration. And just to say, I wish we would have cut ourselves some grace that other Japanese Americans weren't the enemy. They weren't the ones that put us in camp. And a lot of times we lash out at those closest to us rather than seeing the larger forces that were going on. So that's one thing. And I think underestimating in 1942 how quickly things could change and how quickly things could get better. This is not to say that that's going to happen today. The past doesn't predict the future, but just to understand that it is possible that there could be this dramatic shift in public opinion that could happen over a course of relatively short amounts of time. That has happened in history, throughout history. And again, not to count on that, not to predict that would happen, but that is a possible outcome that we need to be working towards. So anyway, I have a lot more, but I'll just stop here and we can address some of these later on.
Yeah, and I'm sure we will, and I hope to hear more from you. And actually, um, in hearing what you were saying, it kind of actually tees us up perfectly for our next question, because a lot of what was shared today, from the first question just kind of talked more about some segregation that occurred between communities, and then even inner communities, how folks were turning on each other. And like you said, Brian, sometimes it's easier to strike out to someone who's closest to you than someone who's at a distance. And so, in this, what are some of the challenges that you've encountered in building solidarity across communities with different but interconnected histories of marginalization? How have you addressed them?
Well, I think I go first on these questions. The challenging is bring, the different community together. It's hard. It's
Mm-hmm.
easy said than done. Because first of all, human nature, oh, this not happened to me. So I'm not gonna react to it. And that remind me with the poem I run across. I don't remember who sent it to me, but um, it stick with me, particular. So working with the refugee and immigrant in the quarter of the centuries, um, we tend to thinking, okay, right now, the suspend the temporary protective status happened to the Venezuelan. And if you're not a Venezuelan, it doesn't, you don't think you need to speak up at all.
Mm-hmm.
So the poem I had earlier, I don't remember who sent it, but the poem said, first they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not the communists. Then they came for the socialists. I did not speak out because I was not the socialists. Then they came to the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jew. I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there no one left to speak out for me. So we need to learn a lesson from this poem. Even though you are not Venezuelan, you're not Nicaraguan, you're not Colombian, but eventually they will come to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I strongly believe our community, we do have differences, but we do have a lot of things in common. At the human connection, I think we need to stand up, stand by, support each other, and protect each other. Don't let the differences dividing us, because that's what the culture of this country is all about. Okay, they will give Brian and Stan a little bit more than they give it to me. I turned around, I hate both of them. And when we supposed to work together to protect each other, I will stand in the sideline and I'm not doing it. So wake up, stand by, stand together, and support our community, because someday they will come to us and we need the other stand by for us.
Yeah, maybe I'll go. I'll go ahead and go next. Yeah, I've spent my career basically working in the Japanese American community and studying Japanese American history. So that's kind of what I focused on. And one of my, I don't know, frustrations is the right word, but I've often lamented how Japanese Americans often throughout history have not supported other groups and have put their own narrow interests up front. And I wasn't around at this time. I'm speaking as a historian now, but in the 1930s, the vast majority of Japanese Americans supported Japan in their incursions in Asia, their colonization, and their campaigns in China and Korea. Japanese Americans largely supported all that. during World War II, when Japanese Americans were rounded up, other Asian Americans largely did not come to support Japanese Americans. And then, flashing forward in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement and so forth, the community was split. There were certainly Japanese Americans who supported it, but a lot opposed it. A lot of Japanese Americans bought into the model minority stereotype, had their own prejudices and so forth. And, I think that's always really bothered me. I think in the last 30 years, things have started to shift a little in the post-redress and reparations era, when I think Japanese Americans, the younger generation, the generation that kind of came of age in the 60s and 70s, assumed community leadership and began to stress that there were more parallels, that, for instance, the African-American community was very supportive of Japanese Americans during World War II and was supportive during the redress and reparations movement. That would not have happened without the leadership of African-American political leaders. And I think after the Gulf War and after 9/11, the parallels became more explicit. And I think Japanese Americans, the community has shifted a bit to become more attuned to that. And, thanks to groups like Tsuru for Solidarity, I think there's a greater embrace of that role and responsibility as Japanese Americans that we have. Because we went through this as a community, we have sort of a platform and an ability to speak out and be listened to. So I think that's changed a little bit, although I think it's still a struggle sometimes, because I think we still sometimes place our own interests above those of other groups who may need that more. So anyway, I'll throw that over to Stan.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Yeah, I really appreciate the message of unity and solidarity Van expressed. That's really important. And Brian always has these real insights into history. I love listening to him. I would say, cross-cultural, cross-community solidarity. There's a couple things. Difficulty, of course, is language and culture. You don't speak the same language, you don't have the same culture. It can be difficult to understand what other people are saying or doing. And that's something that needs to be worked on. There's a basic level of ignorance. A lot of times people in one community don't know the history of the other community, even though they're intertwined, or even though they're very similar. Maybe they happened in different decades. One was early 20th century, one was late 20th century. But a lot of the immigration stories and the refugee stories are very, very similar. But if you don't know that, then you don't draw those connections. And I think something Brian alluded to was we all grow up within the American system that exists today. And to the extent that there is discrimination and racism and prejudice and bigotry in the larger community, whether it's, Hollywood and TV or media that we read, or now blog posts and things, people absorb some of that. And in schools, and, a really local result is you see a big increase in bullying of people based on whatever, their sexual orientation, their race, their ethnicity, their language, their hairstyle, whether they have a hijab or not. And so we really need to make a concerted effort to combat the bad aspects of American society, identify, what does equality and freedom for all mean, and how do we express that? And if that's what we believe in, then how should that affect how we behave, how we talk to other people, how we react to other people? And much more of that work needs to be done to create it. We work in Tsuru for Solidarity. We work very closly with La Resistencia, which is largely Spanish-speaking people who have been directly impacted, meaning that the members and especially the leadership are people who either themselves or their families have been detained or deported. And we've worked really hard to create relationships with them. And so our meetings always have translations, Spanish, English, English, Spanish, so that we don't give priority to one language over the other. I would just add that the idea that we can be safe, that what Van was referring to, that, it's them, it's not me, so I don't have to worry about it. I think the current administration initially said that they were going to just round up the bad guys, people, violent criminals, and deport them. But then they started rounding up people with no criminal history. Then they said, it's only the people who are here illegally. But then they started rounding up people who had valid visas, student visas, work visas. Then they started rounding up people with green cards. They started canceling temporary protected status. Someone with a green card, a permanent residency from the Philippines was just picked up. Auntie Llewellyn was picked up a couple months ago, but someone else was just picked up a few days ago. And there have been U.S. citizens that have been picked up because they were speaking Spanish and with some other folks and got rounded up with everyone else. Or to the ICE officer, they looked suspicious, probably meaning they were not white and they spoke with an accent. And we know that during World War II, as Brian mentioned, like almost two thirds of the people Japanese Americans that got rounded up were U.S. citizens. So I think we need to avoid that complacency that Van so eloquently pointed out, that, just because it isn't your family or your community right now doesn't mean it can't happen to you. And citizenship, we might feel safe right now, but, people who've crossed the international border recently have all said, like, oh yeah, it's a lot harder going across the border. And I really feel sorry for people who are not U.S. citizens, because they really get grilled.
Well, the situations, happen to more and more people who legally in this country, like Stan mentioned, they had a green card, they had U.S. citizen. One of my staff had ice take out next to her house. So on the morning, she went in to work, and the SUV, black SUV with the immigration enforcement print in the roof, on the hood of the car, follow her from Lake Stephen to Everett, and later on decide to bypass her and go forward. And not like they just bypass her, because they took the picture of her license plate and they connected with licensing department, and they found out she had an enhanced driver license. That means you have to be a U.S. citizen to get that kind of driver license. And when they find out about it, and that's what, they change lane and they bypass her and head north on Broadway. So it become, they follow people in to the house and verify the immigration status, because you look different, and that's what it is.
In hearing how each of you answered this question, the thread of similarity that I heard in each of your responses was a form of storytelling and generational storytelling. Historically, how are we passing down this information? How are we connecting each other, and building that solidarity between, Stan, you said there could have been something in the beginning of the 20th century and something at the end of the 20th century, but how are those stories becoming interconnected? And so in that, it makes me think, how important is storytelling for us, especially for survivors or descendants of folks who have been affected by this? How are we passing down this knowledge generationally? And then how are these stories shaping public opinion and policy advocacy today? I think, Brian, with you having the historical knowledge and background, I'm interested to hear how you would answer that.
I guess I would say that unfortunately, it is very true that survivors, the people who went through the experience, have are really important. And I say unfortunately in the Japanese American case, just because we're 80 years, it happened 80 years ago now, and we're basically losing that generation who have firsthand experience of the incarceration. Now there are people who were babies, little children at the time it happened, don't have their own firsthand memories for the most part. I teach a class on this topic, and the highlight of the class is I bring in a former incarceree who can address the class, and you can just see how rapt the students are, having read about this, to hear first person of someone who's gone through that. I think one of the issues we face as a community going forward is, what do we do? How do we tell these stories when that generation is no longer with us, which is unfortunately coming up very soon. Descendants, can certainly play a role, but we don't have the same impact. Me talking about my grandfather, Stan talking about his family, is not the same as, the people who are actually incarcerated themselves. And so, I think we look to the arts, we look to archives. There's so much available in archives now. We look to oral history. There are other vehicles that there are out there, but I think it's an issue going forward as to how you can keep the impact that the survivors, the people who actually went through it, have. And I'm speaking about Japanese Americans today, but it's going to be the same thing with other communities, with with the Vietnamese refugee community in 20 years. Are there going to be people around, or maybe it's longer than that, who have that firsthand experience at that time? And how do you tell these stories going forward? And I think it's something we're all going to have to grapple with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I agree with Brian's. Story is very, very important. And, the generation pivots, a lot of times they feel ashamed. They don't want to share that information with the younger generation. That's one of the reasons. A lot of stories is not been told. And secondly, when they arrive to this country, the main important thing is get the job, get the first job, get the roof to support the family, put under the table. And they put every of that in the back burner.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to bother their children because they want their children assimilate in American culture to become successful. And so they don't want the children burdened with all of that. And I see it on my dad, who passed away 4 years ago. Until 10 years before he passed, he began open up and share. And, we asked the question, but we had to know what question we're supposed to ask
Mm-hmm.
to get the information out from my father. Um, and make sure that we the ones subscribe down and write it down and sharing with the other, sharing with friend and family, sharing with the children, grandchildren, and sharing with the brothers community. And so that's our job. And we own to our community to keep this story alive and moving forward. Because if the story die, nothing happened to us at all. And the next generation, they don't learn because they didn't know. And so they will make a lot of mistakes, like our pivot community. I had quite a few of Japanese American friends, and I call truly friends of mine. And you know what? We know each other for 40 years or more. We normally don't say anything about it. Until about 15 years ago, we all get older, and we know the our time on earth getting shorter and shorter. And we begin sharing the information and the story with each other. So I hope, we learn the lesson for our earlier generations. Our duty is collect projects, saving, and pass on forward to the next generation the struggle, the suffering, and the wisdom we have, so our younger generation, can carry on the torch.
Yeah. Thank you, Van. And thank you, Brian. I think, yeah, it's true that the stories are so important because that's what personalizes things. In Tsuru, we always try to create relationships, and we find that one of the best ways to start and continue a relationship is to trade stories, tell stories, because about our lives, about our family, about our community, because that helps create that cultural connection, the historical connection, the personal connection that will draw us together. When we don't have those connections, when we don't know anyone else's stories, then it's easier to divide us, to push us apart, to say that, well, they're different, and because we don't know any of their stories, so then we can make them the other person. One thing that struck me when Brian was talking about how the older generation is passing, which is true. I was talking with a student group and I was introduced as, and here we're going to hear stories from the past century. Made me feel a little, oh yeah, it's like from another century. But for young people, that's really true. They were born, after the turn of the century. So when we talk about things that happened in the civil rights or World War II or even before alien land laws, it is to them, it's like ancient history. It's like, so we need to also make it not just interesting, but relevant to what folks are going through today. And like Van was saying, we need to know the right question. I guess we need to have what I would call empathetic curiosity. Mm-hmm. We need to be asking questions, but it needs to be done with a sense of empathy that to show that we really want to hear. Mm-hmm. And it's not just because we have to answer a question on our homework assignment, but we really want to know what this person went through. My daughter-in-law's parents are from Vietnam. They're both people and they were talking once with them. We were talking, and her dad was telling us about, getting on the boat and being on it for 3 days with one little kid, not knowing where they're going. And so that Van's story really struck home. It was like, yeah, people in our immediate circle have these amazing stories that we won't know about if we never ask the questions. So, but that's, I think, the beginning of unity and solidarity is listening to those stories.
Dan, I see that phrase empathetic curiosity has been quoted in our chat today. So I even wrote that down really quickly because it really struck me. And just recently, Van, hearing your story of talking to your dad, the older generation, as I feel like they get older, they start to come back to their roots and reflect back on the journey that brought them where they are today. And I, recently just had a moment with my mom about that and her hardships that she faced with immigration and also refugee status coming to the States, and the hardships that my parents faced getting here. And in India was a very scary place for folks for a very long time, and unfortunately just recently again has become a scary place. And so that empathetic curiosity, I think, is what really got my mom to open up just recently and share some stories that my sisters had never heard. My aunt, her sister, had never heard. And it was just a moment of like pure reflection of, wow, there are folks that are walking among us that carry such profound history that if we don't ask these questions, they're going to be gone. And lost forever. So take the time to sit with your elders and use that listening ear to not only answer that question on your homework, but really engage with folks and hear their story. So I appreciate hearing that so much today. And again, I wrote empathetic curiosity down. I'm going to probably write that in bigger letters later and really use that. Um, so switching gears just a little bit in this, and hearing some of this, the words of wisdom that you all have been sharing, um, what strategies have proven most effective when fighting exclusionary immigration policies today? Are there lessons that can inform current movements?
Well, I think we can learn lessons from past campaigns, like the Civil Rights Campaign and the Redress Campaign. When the Japanese Americans were seeking redress through Congress, one of the earliest and strongest supporters in Congress was the Congressional Black Caucus and the Jewish Caucus, because those two groups understood what discrimination was and why it had to be fought and why you had to take a stand against it. So they were, our strongest supporters. And that gave a solid nucleus of votes in Congress where we could start pushing to get other people to support it. I think another big source of support turned out to be veterans because of the World War II record of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team and the Military Intelligence Service that was staffed by Japanese Americans. And so based on their record, they could approach other veterans in Congress, whether they were Republican or Democrat, and have at least an open hearing that they would open doors because of that. So I think doing things based on any kind of personal connection that we already have, based on kind of personal experiences that we share, that life experience. If I've suffered the same way that you suffered, even if we've never met before, it gives us something we can talk about. So anything that we can share together is a way to start. And then if we can have some political unity of, we may not agree on everything, but this immigration policy is dead wrong. And we need to take a stand against it. And we, could disagree on other things, environment or energy or whatever, transportation. But I bike, you drive, that's okay. We can agree on immigration. So I think that's a place to start. But I think sometimes people make a mistake of wanting to have the grand unifying, we're all against this and we all agree on this before they create any of the personal connections. And it makes it much, much harder to do.
Well, that's the great wisdom Stan just shared with all of us. And also, the strategies, a lot of time I applied to and working with partner throughout the state of Washington. We need to educate, not educate, but make sure our people understand, what right they have. Very, very important. And Stan mentioned earlier regarding about language barrier. We make sure we have the research available to the people who we want to share the information with them regarding about the immigration law, about the executive orders, about the rights, and so in their own language. And we need to partner with like Northwest Justice projects, the the lawyers association and the others. And retiree lawyers is available if we be able to get to know them and connect with them. The veteran is very, very powerful to support our cause. Also, and also we need to talking to the generation before us who already go through all the struggle and learn from them. The main important thing is make sure the people who are affected, they know what they write. They know where to get help. They know how to connect with each others. Because the power of human being, power of us is really powerful. We need to build the power in our own community so they can stand up on their own feet, plus the support from us. And we need to connect with all of the organization, even though you don't know the organization, reach out and tell them, I need help. Could you please come and help? We normally want to stay silo, and that not work with the situation currently we are. We also learned a lesson earlier for many incidents. Look at the round up Japanese and put in the intern camp. So that's the lesson we need to learn and keep it in our head and our heart. Never happen again. So the power of the understanding, the right we have, and the power we have that carry us further.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thank you, Van and Stan. I completely agree with everything you said. And the only other thing I would add is that to build on what Stan's comments about the redress movement, there was also a legal strategy that was kind of going alongside of that at the time. I think that's also very important to use the courts as is happening to complement these other strategies as well. It's not perfect, of course, and there's all kinds of issues, but it's another tool we have. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the demographics are such today that it's a very different time from 1942, and there is large public support against a lot of these policies that we can draw on. So I think there are possibilities that exist today. There are ways to find commonalities today that maybe didn't exist in previous eras if we can find the political will to muster that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so much to unpack as you're sharing, and I feel that the questions today just really wove a very intricate kind of message for us that to fight what's happening today, we need historical context and we need storytelling. And we also need transparency. We need empathy and curiosity. And there's things happening today that look different and feel different, but have such similar notes to what's occurred in the past. And it just, makes me feel like, what are some of the words of wisdom that you all can share with us? Not that you haven't already, there's been so much that's been shared, but what is something that you can share with us and our audience today of, what's a call to action for us today as we're hearing you and listening and absorbing what's being said? Do you have any advice for us?
Well, I'll jump in. I would say two things, actually. One is with the stories, we know that there's what we call intergenerational trauma that gets passed on through generations. When you've experienced something really, really bad, the effects of that gets passed on, whether intentional or unintentional, and usually it's unintentional, gets passed on to the next generation. But also there's intergenerational resilience and strength that can also be passed on. So we need to get the complete picture, not just the terrible things that caused the trauma, but also the wonderful things that enabled them, our ancestors, to get through it all and create, a new life. The second thing I would say is that we need to look at the horror of what is happening today. I work with a lot of visits Densho to watch the deportation flights that go in and out of King County Airport. I was just there Saturday doing that. And one of the things that really strikes me is we have these people in chains. Their wrists are chained together, chained to their waist. Their ankles are chained together, being taken off the plane and put on buses to be taken to the detention center, or being taken off buses to be put on the plane to go for deportation. And it just struck me one day that this is happening all over the country. So there's probably thousands of people being moved this way in chains every week. And it has to be the largest transportation program of people in chains since the end of the slave trade.
Yeah.
And to say that is just shocking and horrific. And I think we really need to think about this is what the United States is doing right now.
Well, this country doesn't get better after 50 years. When I arrived in these countries in Brennard, Minnesota, the northern part of the states, my family got welcome at the airports. The next day, the mayor of the city come and visit us. The food is wrapped up in front of my house, abundant of food. And after so many months living in the camps and hungry and everything, that's just a sigh of relief and welcome. 50 years later, the people come to our country. We want to detain them. We want to deport them. We want to suspend them. We want to denaturalization them. And that's what the lingua we heard today. And so if we don't stand up, stand by, stay together to stop this criminal acts, our country will get worse by the hour.
Mm-hmm.
So please join us, stand up, stand by, stay together, support our immigrant and refugee community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you again, Stan and Van. Again, it's just in the short term, I would just say know your rights, and by extension, the rights of others. Again, the legal system isn't perfect, but it's a tool we can use in the short term while we do these other things, in the longer term.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you, William, Stan, and Brian, for all that was shared today and the wisdom that you all bestowed upon us. And there's going to be definite messaging that is, I hope, carried out from today's Zoom call, and we're able to take some time and reflect on what we heard and learned today. I again just want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you for joining us and being panelists today and speaking your truth and sharing your wonderful knowledge with us today. And so with that, I'm actually going to go ahead and transition back to Keiko to take us from here. But thank you so much for letting me be the moderator for today's panel discussion. This was amazing. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Raji.
Thanks, Stan. All right, Keiko, take it from here.
Okay, thanks so much, everyone. I wish I could linger on each of your answers and really just, have time to reflect on the wisdom that each of you brought. Van, you made me think about, you've spoken about the Know Your Rights cards that Refugee and Immigrant Services have printed in a number of languages so that folks have easy access to their constitutional rights. And just appreciate so much what your organization is doing to get that information out. I also just wanted to reflect too, and I think Brian, you might have touched on this, just the importance of language in how we describe these experiences. And I know for the Japanese American community, there is a movement away toward calling the camps internment camps. That's a euphemism. And so we use the word concentration camps, not meaning a parallel to what happened in Europe, but this is an American concentration camp. And that is what we're experiencing again today is the rise again of American concentration camps. So just appreciate the wisdom of that. And just one more thought. I was in a conference last week, a really fantastic conference by the National Equity Institute. And they talked about their use of the term necessary spaces as opposed to brave spaces or safe spaces. And I've just been really reflecting on that in our conversation about how this is a necessary space. This is a necessary conversation we're having. It's not necessarily a safe space, but it is a necessary space for all of these conversations to happen. But before we move into Q&A, I just want to take a pulse of the room. We're going to launch a poll that will just give us a sense of what would support you all in the audience, your advocacy work most. What would support your advocacy work most? And so if you all will just kind of give us a sense of like what tools can we help support in the work that you do with communities? That would be really a great kind of a starting place for continuing this conversation in many ways. So yeah, just give a moment for you all to think about those answers. Okay, it looks like we've got our answers. Can everyone see the poll? Is it visible to you on the screen? That's fantastic. And just, calling out those relationship building opportunities that are so important to the work we do because everything is built on that relationship, that connection to the stories and the history of others. Also tools and trainings, absolutely some support for more shared history across communities, storytelling. That's something here at Northsound ACH we're really focused on this year is just that storytelling piece and ensuring that community has many ways to engage with each other's stories. So thank you so much for just letting us know what is helpful to all of you. And I'm going to just stop this sharing this poll right now. And then just move us to the Q&A. And I know we have a couple of questions in the chat and also through the Q&A function. So this is really just kind of a chance also for you all in the panel to kind of as things have come up for folks, there are a number of questions. One is, how do we help support our children in the honest witness of life as we know it, and help understand their place in this as well? Any thoughts about that, of just helping to support children to witness things as some of you have mentioned, in the last century, right? How do you make that relevant and generative for children to understand, especially in this time when we see the erasure of history happening in our public dialogue and in school settings?
Mhm.
Well, okay. So I think one thing for young people or youth is there's recently a number of really good graphic novels that have come out. And I think given the change in interest and expectations among youth. I think graphic novels can be a great way to convey a lot of information, historical and factual, as well as just entertaining way, and get folks to dive into different histories.
I would add also that there are a lot of, in addition to graphic novels, like children's picture books for younger kids, young adult novels, other aspects of popular culture, even stuff like No No Boy that you just played at the beginning of the show. So there's a lot, depending on the particular interest of the child, there are different entryways into the story. Whatever that may be. So I think that's an opportunity. Even the NFL Network did a show, centering on the Japanese American incarceration about a football team at Heart Mountain and a NFL player named Scott Fujita. So there are entrees even in that realm. So yeah, so there are opportunities that you can use depending on the specific interests of the child.
Well, dealing with children, we have to be as honest and transparency with our children. We can't walk around it and try to hiding it. Even though it depends upon the age of children, and we need to have a different way how to answer and react to our children. And remember, we do have social media, and we have to fight with that also, because a lot of time our children got information out from there. So when we talk to our children, we talk directly to the subject. It's simple as much as we can, honestly as much as we can, and assure them they will be safe regardless what they thinking. And so if we can, doing that, I think our younger generation probably they will be in the better place. And that's what, I strongly believe. And we need to talk about. We can't hiding from children, because like my father, didn't open up until the last 15 years of his life. And we always guessing, what happened, why the country got defeated, why is you running away from the country? And so why we have to starting everything all over again? And I'm not blaming my father. He had the right to doing it. But the earlier we know, the better we prepare, and we be able to protect ourselves, when we're dealing with the public.
Yeah, thanks so much. And these are always, and as you all have pointed out, like there's so many, it's storytelling, it's using graphic novels and other ways to kind of meet the age of the child. It's music. And Nono Boy, absolutely shout out to Nono Boy. He is Vietnamese American and Italian, kind of musicologist, I guess. And his songs are not just about Japanese American experience, but also about Vietnamese Americans and other kinds of refugees, and incorporating and bringing to life those voices and stories again. Another question that has come from the chat, and I'll just read it in full to give context. I feel that one of the increasingly difficult limitations we have as a community and society is a way to ask questions without fear of offending. What are your suggestions for being able to ask others questions about their stories in a way that is safe? It's such an excellent question. Any thoughts on that? How do we approach about their stories without intruding on, their privacy or the protective space that they have built for themselves?
Well, I would say there's a couple things. One is you can do it in a more organized manner, like in Tsuru for Solidarity, we try to set up healing circles whenever we do a big action. We do like protest actions at Northwest Detention Center or down at the federal building. And we try to gather people together afterwards and have what we call a healing session where everyone is allowed to talk and share what they're feeling, what they're thinking. And the emphasis is on empathetic listening, where you pay attention to what the person is saying. And it is not meant to be a Q&A where, oh, that's, I have a different idea, or, it's not to respond to what they're saying, but it's to hear what's coming out of their heart. So you can do an organized thing like that. And it's amazing what people will share in a situation where they know that everyone in that room, even though they don't know them well, is there to listen to their story. The other way is if you're just meeting people on the street or, at work or whatever, is I think there needs to be some ground laying where you develop some level of trust, a knowledge of the other person and their knowledge of you, so that there will be the comfort to open up more. But to come out of the blue and say, walk up to someone, or you just happen to sit next to them at a ball game and say, hey, you look like you're so-and-so. And, I was wondering, I think your people had a really terrible history. Why don't you tell me about it? That won't work.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate, they're just, they're organized opportunities where people have chosen to be present. And again, that kind of creates a doorway to those conversations. Another question from the chat, and this is a specific. Does anyone here know if anyone in the community has successfully received asylum in Canada in the last 60 days to avoid detention from ICE?
We work with, in the last 19 months, we have temporary protective status, asylum seeker, so roughly about 26,000 people in the last 19 months. I haven't heard anyone be able and successful to receive asylum status in Canada, because Canada began clamp down and not welcome refugee and immigrant like they used to be anymore.
I have no knowledge of that either.
There's a request from the audience fan linked to the Know Your Rights cards. And after this, we'll be sending out resources to folks who signed up for this webinar. And I know not just, I know yours are printed cards, but there's also a site, I can't think of the name right now. I think it's called the Red Card site, where you can download templates to create your own Know Your Rights cards to pass out to community too. But we will make sure that information is in the audience's hands. And let's see, there is another question about what advice or counsel would you give someone who is undocumented and looking for safety? And this audience member is also an organizer for Tangle Migranti. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this. And they are curious about how they can answer that question without routing them to kind of wait in line for a call from an attorney. What is an immediate solution for safety? So again, what advice or counsel would you give someone who is undocumented and looking for safety?
Number one, know your right. That's very, very important. And in my agency, we have now know your rights in the plastic card, just like your credit card. You can put in your wallet, your purse. And it's funny, one of my clients punched a hole and hang it on his neck. So that remind him all the time. The right is very, very important. Secondly, you need to prepare just in case you get detained or deported. If you have children, you have to have guardian who will take over for your children. And you have all the legal document in place. And make several copy and hand it over to couple confident or your friend beside a copy you keep. Also, you need to keep the phone number of the legal agency. If you got detained, you call and they will pick up the phone. And I tried it several times, they will pick up the phone on that also. Make sure avoiding the crowds. My advice is just avoiding altogether. And I know our people, we are the community, you know, uh, uh, cultures. We rely on each other. We visit friend, aunt and uncle. Even during COVID, we're doing it. But please, you know, um, make sure is we're not telling you you not visit your family and friend, but if you have birthday party or whatever, keep it low key because the neighbor can call you. They call the immigration for you. And it's not worth it. We can say all the fun, all the celebrations um when thing under control or until the end of this administration, which we still have 3 years and 7 months to go. And that's a long time, but look at it. Yeah. And a lot of us still around today because we're not socialized with kind of isolation and just learn from that lesson and taking care of yourself and your family member and make sure if you have questions regarding your immigration, contact the right organizations before you contact attorney. And also be careful with the scam because a lot of people taking your money and not provide services for you at all. So this is a few things, we share that with our client all the time. We had a know your right in the plastic card, credit card. If any agency want it, just contact us. We mail it to you without any cost or anything at all.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Van. I just, yes, these are the times when we need to protect each other and to protect ourselves as we move through the world. And I just want to uplift a comment from the chat too about the trans community that is facing many of the same kinds of exclusionary actions and crossing a border is fraught with a great deal of danger. I know families with trans youth who are trying to figure out whether they can fly anywhere now. Maybe they have to drive, to their destinations because they can't risk their children, uh, being detained or removed from their care because of their gender identity. So thank you, Saren, for uplifting that as well. And there's that thread through it all, right? There's the narrative is the same narrative. It's only the players that change. It's only the community that changes. But it is the same narrative and it is the same actions. And I think we need to be able to decode this narrative that plays out against our best interests, against our community's best interest, so that we can recognize it when it's being deployed yet again against another community or our own community. So with that, I want to just take a moment and invite everyone in the audience in what is one commitment or insight you're carrying forward from today. Let us know your thoughts and love to kind of, have you go away with something that is new to you or an action that you're ready to pursue or an area of knowledge to, deepen your understanding. Love to hear from you in that regard about what you're taking away from today. And also want to just uplift our survey once again. Love to hear from you as we move forward with our learning series. Pardon me. And just, really important to get your thoughts and your feedback as we shape these moving forward. And I just want to thank everyone for being here today, where we remembered together. Public memory is so important. Public memory, private memory is part of public memory, but public memory is what we share with each other. And so just want to uplift the importance of that, that public memory is also a way we imagine a future together. And and it's a practice and not just a moment, it's an ongoing practice. So we hope you'll stay connected and keep learning and keep showing up, not just for your communities, but for all of us. And just want to kind of uplift some of the commitments I'm seeing in the chat about being reflective and not reactive, that empathetic curiosity again, that is so necessary for really just a rich and thriving life, and a focus on intergenerational resilience. And yeah, shout out to Transwa. I'm going to talk about Transwa in just a moment here too, and appreciation for the poem that was shared, and commitment to deepening conversations that one will have with children as well. And so with that, I just want, before everyone leaves, again, a shout out to the survey, but also to let you know this is just one of the next several months where we will be holding learning sessions for the community. Our next one comes up on June 11th, and we're super excited about it. This is Setting Sun Institute, which is part of Children of the Setting Sun. So some folks will know that is the Indigenous-led digital media organization that has created such rich work for our tribes in this area. They are unveiling their digital heritage library in a special webinar that we'll be holding on June 11th. So make sure everybody has the registration information for that. Big shout out to Transwa in the audience today. They will be on the part of our panel for trans health and well-being that we'll hold in July, along with P-Flag Skagit and some other folks. And so really welcome you into that conversation. Again, there is a thread for all of these. Climate action for vulnerable communities in September, and disability advocacy in the fall, in November. So yeah, just again, great appreciation for our panelists for their gift of time and wisdom in helping to guide us through this difficult conversation. And just thank you for everyone who has been part of this audience, and all of your wonderful questions that you have uplifted, and the attention that you've given to this this very, very important subject for our times. And so with that, I give you back a little bit of your day. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. Please reach out with any questions, and we will be sending out a good deal of information via email in the coming days. So thanks so much to everyone.